Hi everyone. Thanks for joining. I really appreciate those who've been engaging me. Please subscribe, like, and share. And today we are going to talk about colonization and post-colonization. I'm going to do a three-part series. The second one will be today's colonization and post-colonization, and it's from a native perspective. I'm a third generation native, so I'll give a perspective of how colonization has how it started and where we are now. Um, Tomorrow I'll talk about why we can't blame colonization even after colonization happened. We can blame it to some extent, but 60 years later we can't still blame it. Then the third part series I'll try to compare the difference between colonization and slavery. So this is a native perspective. I live in Kenya. Kenya was a former British colony, and my grandfather, great grandfather, all were under the system of colonization because it's only 6 years of independence. So I'll try to shed some light on how the society was, how the system was. And this has been brought about because we have had so many, especially now that the Queen Elizabeth has passed, we have had two factions. Some people are feeling that we shouldn't respect her, we shouldn't honor her because she represents the British monarch. The British monarch was very involved in colonization. It was an empire, and some people feel that what, even though she represents the monarch, the British Empire, we need to give her respect because death is unfortunate for everyone. It's true, death is unfortunate for everyone, but this topic today is not involved in any emotion. It's more of facts, not any emotions. Whatever side you support, uh, that's your own choice. But I'm going to state the facts because these are facts that we cannot ignore. These are facts that live with us. So we need to understand that colonization was a business. It was a business because it was a business by using people. So we all remember that during the Berlin conferences when the partition of Africa was declared, and that partition was done in such a way that you know it clustered tribes together and divided clustered tribes that had nothing in common together in one place and divided tribes that had something in common apart because it was done without any consideration of the local natives, the local tribes. Just to give you a perspective, I live in Kenya. We have 42 tribes. So 42 tribes and 42 tribes in one country. Unlike Germany, where it's only Germany, France, it's only France. Uh, when you go to Russia, it's only Russians. In Africa, you find that Africa is it's the continent with the most ethnicity. I think the ethnicity tribes in Africa are over 5,000, 10,000, if I'm not wrong. We are so many different tribes. So even if you see an African or someone from Africa, it doesn't mean they speak the same language. Like a country like Kenya, where I stay, we have 42 different tribes, and these 42 different tribes speak different languages, have different cultures, and have different way of lives. So when they were partitioning Africa, they just clustered us together, you know, and that's why you see Africa till today is still at war, you know, is still confused because you have all these tribes that don't have anything in common fighting for power, and power is just one power because only one can be the president. That's why you find there's a lot of tribalism in these countries because unlike Germany, it's only one tribe. uh, Africa, we have so many tribes. So the issue is that Africa, we didn't develop to uh, from nations to states because each tribe could have been a state on its own. It could first develop as a nation and then become a state. But now we didn't go through that process like how Europeans went from a nation of Germans to a state of German. So but we didn't have that development. So when you look at colonization, because I'm going to speak on the British point of view, because Kenya was under British colonial rule, but we had the French in West Africa, the Belgians in Congo, the Dutch in South Africa. But I'm going to speak mostly about the British colonial rule in Kenya. The British came to settle around 1900, and they came because that's the time of industrial revolution. They were looking for resources. You know, they wanted to make money. There were so many advertisements in Europe of new territories where the people of Britain could go and make a living, and try their luck. And so during the 1900s, they came and they realized that Africa and Kenya had, especially, let's say, Kenya had a lot of potential in terms of raw material resources, and the biggest asset was the labor market. And uh, when they came here, they realized that they could benefit a lot because, first of all, the labor would have been free, and because the labor, when labor is free, it's cheap. It was kind of some slavery system. So, they came and found that tribes were, all these tribes are not, some are not understanding each other, some were against each other. So they used the system which the British are famous for, which is called divide and conquer. You uplift one tribe so that it can dominate the other by supplying arms and all these things. And when the two tribes fight, by the time they realize they've won each other out, and then you come and take over their territory. But also some tribes were also collaborators. They really supported the British. They gave them intel. It was a very messy and nasty affair. It wasn't a pleasant affair. And the main aim of the British was to come and find market for their products, as well as raw materials, and take resources and take them to Britain. And even if you look at the transportation system in Africa now, people always ask, we build roads. Some people may ask, the British build roads, the French, why isn't Africa developing? It's not developing because the transportation system in Africa, or any kind of infrastructure that was built, was not meant to benefit the African. It was meant to benefit the British system, because if you look at the railways go straight to the mine, to the port. So the railway is not meant to transport people. It's meant just to extract from material back to the port, even the roads. So if you come to a place like Kenya, because we didn't have mines, we had highlands where coffee was grown, tea was grown, this plantation. The railways used to go there to pick up the tea, the coffee, and then back to the port. So that was the system for almost 60 years, just extraction, extraction. And when they came, when they settled, especially, let's say, in the highlands, in central Kenya, they took over the lands, and because the lands were very fertile, and they were good for tea and coffee, just like some lands in the UK where they were planting coffee and tea. And they displaced the locals, and then they bought a system of taxation. And taxation was a very smart system, because now locals were required to pay taxes, but you can't pay taxes on your own. You need to get a job. So where do you get a job? You have to get a job to the colonial system, the colonial master. So the guy comes and displaces you, starts a plantation, and then you, because you're displaced, you're just around. Now you have to work for him, because you have to pay taxes, because tax is mandatory. So this system continued for 60 years, operation. There was also limitation on how much wealth you're supposed to own. Um, the cows, the goats, and you had to have an identification card. It was called the Kipande system. You used to show it everywhere you go. Cops will stop you. The colonial system cops will stop you, because they also collaborators. Sometimes collaborated with the British, and they helped the British even to maintain law and order. So they will stop you. And it was a very brutal system, because when uprising started, like the Mau Mau, there was a lot of uprising in the 90s. People were being killed, kidnapped, tortured. It was a very brutal system of manhunt, merciless. Uh, and you must understand, colonization is a very expensive uh, investment, because you're trying to subdue people who are not agreeing with you. So you have to use all the force and strength. And who are paying for that? It's the natives. The natives are the ones who are fitting the bill, because at the end of the day, you know, you you're pretending like you're using your own resources, but you're pushing them harder to keep on fitting the bill, and investing more in the project. So when you reached closer to the 1950s, the 1960s, because we got independence in 1963, 1964, Now the militia movements have become very rampant, very violent, and also the British government has increased its force and pressure on the militia. Even by the time we were getting independence, before the British gave us independence, the documents, all documents showing how they tortured people, the evidence, everything was burned, destroyed, so that even when, by the time they were giving us independence, we didn't have any evidence. We only had word of mouth, but people knew what was happening, even though they destroyed the evidence. But the evidence was destroyed so that in the future generation could not launch successful cases against the empire. And what happened is that uh, this system of colonization continues till today in Africa. And but now it's not the British, it's the black person, our own people, because what the British did is that the people they left in power were mostly collaborators when it comes to African countries. That's why even today you find it's the same kind of system of slave master, but now it's our own Africans who are doing it, because the people who are given power when the British were living, you must know that the British were also very smart. They understood psychology. They were a conquering empire for almost 1,000 years. So they understood how to divide, to control, to manipulate the system. So when they were living, let's say Kenya or African countries, they left power to the people who collaborated with them, the people who benefited from the system of colonization, the black people who, some of them might call them betrayers. They were so that they can continue the ideology, because then the indoctrination started when you're small. So since the British came, they opened their own schools when they came in Kenya, and they allowed some African children to go and study there. And most of the African children who were studying there were children of the collaborators. If you collaborated with the British government, probably you had been given the title of a chief, and then your child can go and study in a school. And then when he studies, he's indoctrinated into the British system. He's given that mindset that is always above, like he feels like he's there, like how the British people felt. He can mingle with them. So he even looks down upon his African people. And then they go to Britain, they study, and when they come back, they have a mindset that somehow resembles the colonial master. So even when he takes over leadership, because most of them took over the leadership of these countries because they were the sons of collaborators, the daughters. The mindset, even when the British are not colonizing us, the mindset is still the same, because they view they have that class mentality. They view you as a lower, because and him he views himself, or she views himself a bit privileged, because he has gone to school, studied, gone to Britain. So he'll view you as an African, as a, even though you're the same skin, they're coming from the same place, but he'll view lower, and he'll feel more elitist. That's the word I'm looking for, because he has studied. So he has that mindset. That you see even today, that African leaders have so much wealth, but their people are poor, because it's a system that was built for 60, 70 years. And when they left the country, they couldn't leave it to the real freedom fighters. They left it to the collaborators, people who won't persecute them, people who won't chase their way. Because when independence was granted, it's not that the colonial master, the French, the British, all left the country. They needed to protect the interests. Some of them owned large tracts of land that farmed tea, dairy. So they needed to protect the interests. So they couldn't put hand of a government to freedom fighters, to guerrilla war. No, no, no. They had it to black people, but black people who had been trained under the British system, indoctrinated, who would sympathize with them and continue the elitist kind of mindset. That's why most people always ask, where is African leaders so rich and more poets, because it's that elitist mindset that and it's a system for 60, 70 years. So when you look at that, and the suffering that people went through, the destruction of property, a lot of people were displaced, a lot of people were killed. If you are a famous writer, a Nobel Peace Prize nominee called Mutainguni, he speaks of how his brother was killed, by the British. They attacked his village, killed his brother. Was mute, he couldn't talk, deaf, if I'm not wrong, and he was killed. It was disaster on disaster. Colonies. It was a very painful fast, and even it has affected even you know, our school system, because our school system also because of the people who took over the government, the elitist Africans who under British influence. You know, our books don't really depict of the horrors or tell the true stories of what happened. I have no issue with British textbooks because those are their own textbooks. They can write what they want. But when you come to African society, they are not depicting. They're depicting is as if colonization was a 2 year event, 3 event, but it destroyed so far many families. You know, clumping that of tribes, like I was saying before, tribes that have nothing in similar. That's why you see even today, Africa is full of civil war. Tribes don't understand. Tribalism is very high because we are not given time to become nation state. You know, unlike Germany, France, where it's only one tribe, the Germans. France is only one tribe. But here we were not given time to become states. We went from nations, from tribes to state without going through a nation state. You know, because Kenya we have 42 tribes, and if we had given that time, it means we could have been 42 countries because the Kikuyus could have been a country on its own, from a nation to a state, from a tribe nation to a state. The laws the same, the Kalenjin the same, the Somali the same. But this clamping up made it hard. Uh, you know, and we all have different languages, ideologies, beliefs, cultural, religion. So it made it hard to come to an understanding. And remember that all these tribes are clamped up together, and the system of governance is one of democracy where you choose one president. So each tribe will compete to have their own one there. And this is what brings a lot of civil war in most African countries. Because you find like Kenya, we have like 42 tribes, and each tribe wants in the presidency is only one person. So each tribe wants their person to be there. And this is very hard. It's not only in Kenya, in the whole of Africa. So this system is, you know, these are one of the reasons why Africa has continued to be divided, not united. And, you know, on the next episode, I'll look at, yes, colonization happened because now we are 60 years in independence, but we can't now blame colonization. You know, it was a past that we are not happy it has affected us, but we also need to move on because we must remember that all countries, almost all countries were colonized. Even if it wasn't the British, there were other empires that colonized, you know, the Ottoman, you know, the USSR, you know, the Genghis, you know, the Napoleon. So, and if you look at the example of Africa and Asia, you find that Asians were colonized, but they moved past colonization. Their countries are advancing. So, in the next episode, I'll be talking about why we can't keep on blaming colony. Yes, it happened, but at the end of the day, we have had 6 years of self-rule. We have the people who are ruling Africa are our own people, but you're not keeping them accountable. You know, they're not building roads, school. So I will look at why we can't keep on blaming colonization. We need to get our act together. You know, I understand it's a very painful past. You know, we experienced, but 6 years from uh, after independence, we need to have seen something. Africa shouldn't be begging for food, aid, money. You know, we shouldn't be a bread basket. You know, we have the most resources. We have the most fertile land. You know, our rivers are so big they can power the whole world. The whole Sahara Desert is a solar power generator. You know, just waiting to be unleashed to the potential. We have the biggest lakes. You know, the longest river. So we can't keep on. And I'll be looking at that and trying to share my perspective. But that's just what I was trying to show how colonization, you know, uh, how colonization, especially in Kenya, how it started, and just a bit of how in Africa. Because if you go to like a place like Congo, how the Belgians uh, colonized Congo, it's even worse. You know, it's even worse than what the British did because you know King Leopard killed 10 million Congos. He halved the population. He was cutting them arms. You know, that was the time that rubber was very, you know, very valuable commodity because that was the time that tires were being made. So Congo was producing a lot of rubber. And King Leopold, you know, he literally took, you know, Congo is a very big country. It's almost half of Europe. He literally made it his own possession and he put quotas. If you don't bring a certain number of rubber, your hands are cut, you're killed. It was the most brutal. In fact, people say that it can be it is compared. It's not. It can. it is compared or even worse than the Jewish massacre by Hitler, because also this was another genocide that's never talked about. Half the population being cut. It was very, very, very gross. The history of Belgium in Congo is one of the worst. Even when the British colonized, it didn't go to that extent. At least British, they colonized and they left system, because even if you look at the governments that the system that British left, most British country didn't, former British colonies didn't go to the civil war. Apart from Nigeria and a few, but they didn't rupture as bad as like the Belgium in Congo, the French, because especially the Belgium, because that was full extraction, they didn't care about you. So, but I was talking on a perspective of a British and the former British colony. So, in the next episode, I'll talk about where we should move on from colonial, and you can't blame it, because the blame game is over. It's time to act, and and also we will be respected in the world if we try to improve ourselves. We must remember also the Chinese were looked down upon, but now the Chinese, everyone respects them. They didn't keep saying they are colonized. You must remember China had 100 years of humiliation. China, in fact, was being tried to be colonized by all superpowers, by Portugal, by France, by Britain, by America. So China had even more division, was trying to be carved up even more worse than Africa. We must remember also Japan. Japanese people were seen as low life at one point in the 1800s, the 1700s. They were seen as low lives, but now they are respected. So for us to gain respect, we can't be always crying colonization. We need to stand up and be respected. So thank you, guys. Uh, we'll continue engaging, and I'll just keep sharing the information. And I hope you guys like the content. Please subscribe, share, and like. It's always an honor to be here. Cheers, guys. Thanks.